As refugees, we were seen as a burden, lacking rights, access to healthcare and education.
Chers amis, si nous parlons d'imaginer la paix, et vous voyez le titre assez énorme, important, bousculant même, si nous parlons d'imaginer la paix, c'est que nous ne sommes pas...
Venant de tous les continents, de toutes les religions et associant nos jeunesses. Cher Andrea,
could you direct me to Forum 10?
10? There.
There, to the left? Okay. Can I have a, yeah. Thank you very much.
After the two bombs were used against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, human builds more than 70,000 nuclear weapons.
The discussions this week are both timely and more relevant than ever. For the last 79 years, we have lived in an era defined by an existential nuclear threat.
International meeting remembering Hiroshima and Nagasaki, imagining a world without nuclear weapons. It was quite a, I would say, a very touching and deeply moving experience for me. We visited the Jimbaku Dome in Hiroshima and the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, and the Haiku Center in Nagasaki, and the Urakami Cathedral, and the Habaku no Maria image of our Blessed Mother, who was the statue that was destroyed except for her face in the bombing on August 9th at 11:01 a.m. 1945. What was really poignant was when I saw the images of the children running to their school windows when they saw the flash of light, and I just felt deeply for them, and the great tragedy that they experienced. I returned home and I was taking friends to the in Santa Fe, to the Los Alamos, of course, it is in our Archdiocese of Santa Fe. And I was taking them to the New Mexico History Museum, and they have a big display on the Manhattan Project. And I realized that I was living really with a very false sense of complacency when it comes to nuclear weapons. The Archdiocese of Santa Fe is right at the epicenter of the nuclear age, in the Trinity test of July 16, 1945, when Oppenheimer and his team discovered and manufactured and deployed Little Boy and Fat Man. I realized that our local church needs to be at the table of peace to talk about, to advocate for verifiable multilateral nuclear disarmament. As I came to this personal reawakening of the fear that nuclear weapons engenders in me, and it should in all of us, I was alarmed to realize, looking into the situation, that we've come a long way since 1945. For example, if you look at the just one Trident submarine up in Seattle area, one Ohio-class submarine, as you no doubt know, can unleash up to 192 nuclear warheads with the potential of wiping out civilization as we know it. In fact, the reality is that we are now in a new nuclear arms race that is arguably far more dangerous than the first. We have new cyber and hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, and multiple nuclear adversaries are increasing the grave risks, even as climate change and growing economic inequality accelerate global instability. The old rationale that we need thousands of nuclear weapons for the declared rationale of deterrence is false. Reagan and Gorbachev started another conversation, and they declared that a nuclear war can never be won, it should never be fought. And they signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, on December 8, 1997, which happens to be an important feast in the Catholic Church for our Blessed Mother. And so what conversations can we start? I've been inspired and encouraged by the conversations already started by so many of you, with Pope Francis declaring that even their possession is immoral in 2019. This was a monumental statement by Pope Francis, to move away from even deterrence and say, no, even their mere possession is immoral. We need to have conversations about that, to talk about that, and the direction that it should lead us in. Here in New Mexico, the New Mexico Conference of Churches has endorsed my pastoral letter. The Mountain Cloud Zen Center in Santa Fe has had many conversations about this, along with other Buddhist centers. Soka Kadai has been a key partner in our Trinity Test prayer commemorations these past 3 years. I've been inspired by the work of Sant'Egidio, and there are many peace initiatives grounded in prayer and the light of the gospel. I've been encouraged by the Parliament of the World's Religions and their vision for a world of peace, justice, and sustainability. We were lulled into the false sense of complacency at the end of the Cold War. We get lulled into that false sense of complacency by narratives that somehow tell us that we have to build up our nuclear arsenals, and that somehow these will keep us safe, and the opposite is true. I know this isn't easy. Oftentimes we're called naive. But who is it that is really naive? Robert McNamara, who we remember, who was the defense secretary back in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, said that human civilization survived only by luck. Counting on luck is not a winning strategy. The history of nuclear weapons is replete with near misses, miscalculations, and accidents. Next August 2025 will mark the 80th anniversary of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I hope that by that time we can see some real progress and steps taken for nuclear states to support the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the TPNW. I realize that this is a great step and a very difficult one. As you well know, the nuclear states have not signed the treaty. I join many of you in advocating that they do sign the treaty. I was privileged to be at the UN conference last year at the Second States Party meeting for the TPNW, and I hope to attend again in March of 2025. The movie Oppenheimer has reawakened an awareness among many of the threat that nuclear weapons pose to our very existence. It reminded us that the world entered the atomic age here in New Mexico on July 16, 1945. I pray that the conversation begun by my pastoral letter in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe will join the countless other conversations that are calling for nuclear disarmament, including yours. The downwinders of New Mexico and the Habakusha of Japan give living witness to the importance of this vital conversation. And God, who has begun the good work in us, bring it to fulfillment. God bless you all.
We have what's referred to as nuclear winter, which means that temperatures drop because all the fires of the cities that have been attacked create soot that goes up into the atmosphere, blocks incoming sunlight, and temperatures drop by about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. And one of the most dramatic impacts of this would be on food production. Our agriculture quite simply fails, and within 2 years, the estimate is that more than 5 billion people die of starvation.
The Soka International, or SGI, has worked for the abolition of nuclear weapons over many decades. Our work in this area originated from a declaration made by the second president of the Soka Buddhist movement, Josei Toda, in September 1957. In his declaration, Toda impassionately called for the abolition of nuclear weapons, insisting on our inviolable right to live as citizens of the world. And he stated that he wished to attack the problem at its root and expose and rip out the claws that lie hidden in the very depth of such weapons. Each human life is infinitely noble and variable. We each have limitless potential. This is our core belief as Buddhists, and I believe it is a universal value in most of the world religions. At the same time, in our Buddhist philosophy, we recognize that each of us also possess potential for destruction, for disregarding and making light of others' lives. We call this inner negativities fundamental darkness. Thus, in our Buddhist movement, the challenge of nuclear abolition is not an abstract theory or solely a security strategy. It is intrinsically a human challenge, a competition between our human dignity and inner darkness. There's one testimony from a Hiroshima A-bomb survivor, Ms. Reiko Yamada, I will never forget. She stated, and I quote, "A good friend of mine in the neighborhood was waiting for her mother to return home with her 4 brothers and sisters. Later, she told me that on the second day after the bombing, a moving black lump crawled into the house. They first thought it was a black dog, but they soon realized it was their mother. She collapsed and died when she finally got to her children. They cremated her body in the yard," unquote. Who deserves to die such a death? Nobody. Yet our world continues to spend billions of dollars to upkeep our nuclear arsenals, and our leaders at times imply readiness to use them. It is utterly unacceptable. Similar sentiments have been expressed by downwinders in the United States and generations of nuclear testing survivors in Kazakhstan, Marshall Islands, and others. They too feel their communities were dispensable, and they continue to suffer the effects of nuclear weapons every day. In the words of the Hibakusha, we find the fundamental answer to why nuclear weapons must be abolished, that, quote, "no one else should ever suffer what we did." However, their voices are not heeded by those in decision-making positions. At this year's NPT Preparatory Committee, which concluded last month, nuclear-armed states continue to advocate for a security system that relies on nuclear weapons, stressing the importance of nuclear deterrence. Earlier this month, Representative Michael Turner, who is the chairman of the U.S. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, issued an op-ed in the New York Times calling for more investment in U.S. nuclear arms programs. It is claimed that nuclear deterrence is essential for national security, but the renewed nuclear arms race that we just heard about invites the question, whose security is being protected and at what cost? The UN Secretary General Guterres has rightly warned that nuclear weapons offer no security, just carnage and chaos. So long as nuclear weapons exist, they will be used one day. The result, as we heard, would not only be the destruction from the blast and widespread long-term harms caused by radiation, but also what scientists call nuclear winter and nuclear famine. the collapse of global food production that would result from the climatic changes provoked by nuclear detonation. Therefore, no one on Earth would be unaffected by even a limited nuclear exchange, as Ivana just illustrated in her simulation. The 2022 SGI Peace Proposal, authored by our late international president, Daisaku Ikeda, urged that we must detoxify ourselves from the current nuclear-dependent security doctrines. As people of faith in peace communities, we have the responsibility to partake in this process of detoxification and heal the world. As Austrian Ambassador Alexander Kmet, who served as the president of the first meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, that we heard about, he stated, quote, "If nuclear weapons are discussed only among military experts, it is almost impossible to get out of the idea of nuclear deterrence. You have to bring in the legal perspective, the moral and ethical dimension," unquote. As mentioned by the Archbishop Wester earlier, Pope Francis has declared both the use and possession of nuclear weapons immoral. Our organization was one of the 13 cooperating organizations in the 2017 conference, Perspectives for a World Free from Nuclear Weapons and for Integral Disarmament, held at the Vatican, where the Pope stated, quote, "Weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons, create nothing but a false sense of security. They cannot constitute the basis for peaceful coexistence between members of the human family, which must rather be inspired by the ethics of solidarity," unquote. The SGI has fully supported the TPNW from its inception as a member of civil society and faith community. The adoption of the TPNW owes so much to the hibakusha and those from affected communities, whose testimonies provided an indisputable case for addressing the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and eliminating such weapons. The treaty endeavors to address the harms caused by the victims and the environment through its obligations under the Articles 6 and 7. As SGI, we have also worked on the implementation of the treaty's Article 12 on universalization by encouraging states to sign and ratify the treaty. With the current global situation in which countries are expanding and modernizing their nuclear arsenals, and the growing risk of the use of nuclear weapons, the SGI has advocated for a commitment to no first use of nuclear weapons as a means of risk reduction and confidence building. No first use would be a critical step toward reducing the role of nuclear weapons in national security and serve as an impetus to advance nuclear disarmament. But fundamentally, abolishing nuclear weapons would mean transforming the ideas about our security. So it would require establishing the respect for the dignity of life as the core premise of our society, as well as inspiring hope that such change is possible. For that reason, as SGI, we have also always emphasized the importance of education, so that it would be common sense that national security systems based on mass violence are not acceptable. Learning about the lived experiences of survivors are critical in such educational efforts. To conclude, I'd like to share an insight from Daisaku Ikeda I've always cherished. He said, quote, "There are those who tell us that humanity is condemned to war and violence, that it is ingrained in our nature to hate and kill each other. Such people will tell you that they are simply being realistic. I sincerely hope that you will never submit to such realism, not about your own lives, not about the world. If you examine such claims carefully, you will usually find that those who make them have simply decided, in an arbitrary and often self-serving way, what is realistic and what is not. settle and deny the limitless possibilities of reality to make it fit on their own pessimism and narrow-mindedness, unquote. The only assurance that nuclear weapons would not be used is their total elimination. Let us not allow anyone to tell us that it is impossible. Let us dare to imagine peace and the world free of nuclear weapons, fully believing in the human capacity and creativity to do so. I thank you very much.
Really dedicating yourself to nuclear abolition and disarmament.
Well, thank you so much. I think I would share a kind of two turning points in my life. So as I mentioned, I'm a Buddhist, and I was actually, I know I appear young, but I'm in my early 40s. And when I was a student, my
definitely younger than all.
That's good to know. My organization started a student movement to abolish nuclear weapons. And to be honest, I was a student of human rights before, and even so, I quite didn't see the connection between what I studied and and nuclear weapons. But as I really studied not only the Buddhist texts, but also the testimonies of survivors, I realized actually nuclear weapons is the biggest human rights issue, because if used, it destroys the world in an instant, and even in their production and testing, they continue to violate human rights of so many people. So that was really a rude awakening, if you will. As a Buddhist, I must hear about this issue, because to me, the dignity of life is so sacred in my teaching. The second part that I want to share is fast forward in 2014, I was invited to work for the current office, and I was so fortunate to be able to go to Vienna. There was a humanitarian consequence conference building toward the TPNW. And I was fortunate to sit in a session with one of the hibakusha who is very active in the field. Her name is Sept. She also accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 on behalf of ICANN with then Executive Director. So she shared her story in a small workshop, which wasn't her story of how she was when she survived the nuclear weapons detonation, which is a powerful story. But in this story, she actually shared her story of why she decided to become an activist. And due to time, I'm not going to share the story, but what I heard was such a painful story, because by speaking up, she was criticized. And, she was in the U.S. and she was actually told to go back to her own country. She received death threats. She was a young student at that time too. So she actually has to decide at that moment, do I continue to speak up or do I remain silent? And we know the result, because she's one of the most outspoken person, people I've ever met. But I thank her decision, and I realized it's not an easy decision. No, actually, only a very small fraction of hibakusha decide to speak up, because it's so traumatic and so painful. So I really feel, I hope, how many of you have had the experience of being able to hear stories of survivors, either firsthand or through video or books? Wow, not many of you. So I really hope you take the time to research, to watch a video or read stories, because it's a gift that they give us, and I think we can't take that for granted. It's almost like they are shredding their life each time to tell us, and I know they experience joy, as Ivana mentioned, when they share, because they know that we are listening and receiving the legacy, but also it's a huge burden on them. So listening to her story was something that really solidified my determination that I would commit myself to this work until the day I see a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you so much.
のエジディオが純粋に感じたこの宗教指導者の役割、非常に力を持っている人たちがそれぞれの国やネットワークを通じて、この一番大切な、先ほどから出てるように、彼らを通して宗教者が共同していく、競争していくんじゃなくて共同していく。そうすることによって非常に厳しい課題、例えば今言ったディスアーマメントとか核武装、核兵器をなくしていくから、これはものすごく大変なことですけども、勇気を持って宗教者が宗教的な全てを政治に対して持ったりとか、そういうことですね。福祉の宗教者、宗教指導者として取るべき。だから宗教指導者は勇気を持たなきゃいけない。
On deterrence, I want to just emphasize this notion that deterrence relies on the willingness, right, to retaliate, to attack, but there's quite simply no plan B for what would happen if that failed. There is no plan to save the people of Paris, or the people of Moscow, or the people of New York, or any, as Andreas put it, any of the cities. In fact, in the 1960s, the United States had a plan to target with a nuclear weapon every single city in the Soviet Union that had over 25,000 people. So they had enough weapons to do that. And in fact, at the time, they had decided, and this is all declassified, this is from the book by Daniel Ellsberg, Confessions of a Nuclear War Planner. At the time, they were also planning to hit all the cities in China too. So it was going to be if the U.S. had been attacked, it would have attacked both of these. So no plan B. And I want to stress, this came up a little bit, but I just wanted to underscore this role of luck. Role of luck in the Cuban Missile Crisis was real. Yes, the presidents were wise and restrained, and both went against what actually, at least in the United States, what JFK's cabinet wanted him to do. But there was also luck because there was a possibility of a submarine that came up to surface firing and, in fact, starting a nuclear war, just because the conditions at the time were ambiguous. I won't go into the details. But over the decades, and this is just for the United States, we have dozens of examples of incidents where two airplanes carrying nuclear weapons hit one another. Bombs fell out of airplanes and landed in someone's backyard in South Carolina. Submarines hit one another. There are 50 nuclear weapons at the bottom of the ocean currently. These accidents are numerous, and we are quite simply going to run out of luck if we keep playing this game. So I love what someone said about rolling the dice. How long will they keep rolling the dice with our lives? The humanity, I don't mean a single person or even millions of people, humanity, survival of humanity. So let me leave you with two quotes. The first one is from John F. Kennedy's peace speech, which was mentioned. And it's I just love this. He talks about what kind of peace do we mean. And he says, not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace for our time, but peace for all time. And I think that we have to actually imagine that kind of a peace. That I think is quite incumbent upon all of us. The second quote I want to share comes from actually someone in the American military. His name is General Lee Butler. He's still alive. He was head of strategic commander, something along those lines. I don't know the military title as well. But he said after actually being one of these people who were sort of responsible for firing nuclear weapons and responding in nuclear war, he began speaking against nuclear weapons, for nuclear disarmament, and he stated, "We cannot at once keep sacred the miracle of creation and hold sacrosanct our ability to destroy it." So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you so much.
Tonight I want to finish with a gift of a name. We had the pleasure of having Anna mentioning Reiko Yamada, right? It was beautiful of Anna to mention that. First of all, it's good for us to hear a name, right? We all have a name, and when we die, we have ashes and name, right? So name is important for us. So what I want to give you is a name of somebody that was killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a gift, a little memory. It's just somebody that you never met, that you are meeting today simply through this gesture. And I would like to keep this as an invitation to think that as we are all made victims by somebody else's choice, we are all made brothers and sisters by our choosing, by our welcoming one another, starting from the name, starting from the individual personal reality of being who we are, because somebody gave us the gift of a name. My name is strange because in Italian it's a male name. In all the other languages it's a female name. And so everybody look at me and say, are you sure that you are who you are? But what I would like you to do is actually take the name that was given to you and give it to someone else. Receive from someone else that name and remember to be the ibakusha that Anna was mentioning before, right? We all need to share in this memory. We all need to make the effort to receive the memory and share the memory with others. The prayer for peace is this extraordinary moment in which we come together, imagining what is possible, imagining what needs to happen. Thank you all.
Bienvenue à Paris. Bienvenue sur le parvis Notre Dame.
À travers le monde, le soir du 15 avril 2019. Mais Notre-Dame ne nous a pas seulement émus au plus profond du cœur, elle a fait monter une prière immense, comme l'aurait fait une personne chère à qui il arrive malheur. Dans quelques semaines, à son comble, quand de nouveau nous la recevrons comme l'un de ces lieux forts de la prière au Seigneur de l'univers. En cette ville, les magnifiques Jeux olympiques et paralympiques ont montré les vertus.
Moins en moins nombreux de ma génération à pouvoir témoigner du grand mal qu'est la guerre. Pourtant, de Marie qui portait une étoile jaune et que je n'ai jamais revue, une période triste de la mémoire des personnes âgées comme moi. Je voudrais vous dire, ne vous laissez pas convaincre que la guerre est inévitable, mais gardez et faites grandir la paix que ma génération a imaginée après la guerre. Aimez la paix.